I suppose we should tell people where we are.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We're talking to you from, well, my home actually in North Wales, in Holyhead, and Ben lives not so far away down the road, the other side of Anglesey, the island. And it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, whatever time you guys have out there.
Oh, hello back to Lebanon and many greetings back to Poland. I was just in Warsaw this last weekend at the university giving a talk, and it was very lovely and snowy and twinkly, and good to be back in Poland. No snow here in Wales.
No, not yet. And yes, with this talk today about Macmillan's 180th, one of the biggest tasks in learning English, we think, is keeping up to date with the changes that are taking place in the language. I mean, there aren't so many changes in grammar or pronunciation, as they both change rather slowly. But vocabulary, of course, as you all know out there, can change very quickly indeed.
How many new words come into the English language every year, Dad?
Well, about 1,000, more or less. An awful lot of them, of course, are technical terms that most learners wouldn't need to encounter, words from biology or zoology and things like that.
1,000
or so, yeah.
Many of them stay in the language?
2 or 3 every day, means in effect, doesn't it? Yeah. Do many of them stay? No, actually, not at all. About 3/4 of them will disappear or become outdated, Times change, culture changes, things people talk about change, they'll go. But 1/4 of them remain. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that while they're being used, they pose a problem for learners.
Right, especially young learners of English. You might see or hear these new words on the internet, but not find them in the dictionary because they're too new.
Yeah, that's right. So the question is, how can they be helped?
Teachers tell us that it helps students of English to know about the background for a new usage, the context, who used it and why. Context, of course, adds interest, and most importantly, it helps words stick in the memory.
And not just for the language side of learning, it's also very useful for students of English literature, as actually so many of the new words that come into everyday use start out in the writing of famous authors.
It's amazing. It's really amazing to see how original authors are when we recognize how inventive they've been with words.
So that was the idea behind the talk we're doing for you today. We thought we'd use Macmillan's anniversary to look at the way some new words have come into English over the past 180 years, using the books that Will was telling you about a few minutes ago, using the books that they published.
And over the course of the talk, if you've got a question for us at the end, then don't drop it into the chat box because we'll never find the questions, but put it into the actual Q&A box. Now, there were so many influential books from both literature and language in Macmillan's list.
Oh, yes. I noticed when I went through the list the other day, I noticed 2 in particular. For literature, in 1861, there was a book called The Golden Treasury, edited by Francis Turner Palgrave. It's one of the most successful anthologies in English literary history, fitted neatly into a jacket pocket. I mean, I had this in school. We looked at The Golden Treasury all the time. Did you have that?
In my school, we didn't have books in my school.
Yes, you did.
But what about, that was literature. What about for language then?
Well, I think it has to be the 1898 publication of a book called A Manual of English Grammar by a man called J.C. Nesfield. He was a very prescriptive grammarian, not very much in tune with what we talk about today, but it was one of the most successful grammar books of its time, both in the UK and abroad. Still going strong in 1964 in a 4th edition. I wish my books lasted that long.
Well, goodness. And may yet. Now, when you look through the list of authors that Macmillan has published, virtually all the famous writers of the 19th century are there. So for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to select some writers from that list and show you some different kinds of word creation.
Yes, that's the idea. Let's begin. Who should
some
we begin?
Neologisming.
Yeah. Very good, Ben.
Thank you. That's a new word.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of syllables in it.
It has, hasn't it?
So let's begin. I'm going to begin with Lewis Carroll. I mean, Will has mentioned the first publication of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland in 1865, and then the follow-up book, Through the Looking Glass.
Both stories, of course, made famous by the Disney film and more recently the Tim Burton adaptation. But what's so special linguistically or English languagey about Lewis Carroll?
Well, he does something very surprising. He shows how even completely made up, invented words can catch the public imagination and enter the language.
Making up new words. It's the sort of thing kids love to do, adults too.
Yeah.
We've chosen an example from the first chapter of Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah, it's if you've read the book, you might remember. Alice finds herself in the world where the chess pieces are alive, and she sees a book with a very strange poem in it. Now, if you don't know the poem, don't try to understand the unusual words, as they're all invented. Instead, listen to how they sound and think of the images they conjure up in your mind. Anyway, the poem's called Jabberwocky.
'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy with the borogoves and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous Callooh, Callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe.
Yeah, well done, Ben. Yes, he repeats that first verse at the end, doesn't he? The slithy toves are happy now that the Jabberwock has been killed, you see. But let's talk about the strange language in there. The title first, Jabberwock. Jabberwock means a nonsensical expression, and you'll find it in the dictionary these days. Well, the words may be nonsense, but they do actually convey a sort of sense. I mean, take slithy, for instance. What does that conjure up for you, Ben?
Slithy, goodness. It's like slimy, and lithe, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. A combination of slimy and lithe, exactly. Creations like this are called blends, as they take the first part of one word, slide bit, and join it or blend it to the last part of another, the ithe bit. So slithy. And there was another one, I love this one, galumphing.
Galumphing.
Yeah,
Well,
what's that one?
That's got to be something to do with like galloping and triumphant, I suppose. After all, they've just killed the Jabberwock.
Yeah, exactly. Galumphing. Yeah, it's a great word, great word. And some of the words have become part of the standard language. I mean, chortle, for instance.
Oh,
He
yeah.
chortled in his joy.
And frabjous is another, which sounds like a combination of fair and joyous, I suppose.
Exactly. And all these words are in dictionaries now. So making up words is great fun, and it's a good way to get the kids in the classrooms or the adults in the classrooms to become more confident in playing with the language. You can try a nonsense game.
All right, well, let's try it now.
Oh, all right. Okay, let's look. The weather's improved today, this afternoon here in Wales. Let's invent a new adjective by blending. Choose 2 adjectives to do with the weather.
All right. Well, it's usually raining in Wales, and there's quite a wind too because we're on an island here. So, what about rainy and breezy?
Rainy and breezy. Well, that could make rainsy.
Rainsy, yeah.
Rainsy. It's
Okay.
very rainsy outside today.
And if the weather got worse, we'd have the rapper Stormzy, then I suppose.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
rainsy is a day that's both rainy and breezy.
Indeed. Indeed it
Great.
is.
All right. Well, who is next in our Macmillan's author list?
Yes, well, we've got Rudyard Kipling. Macmillan also published Rudyard Kipling.
Oh, best known for The Jungle Book.
Yes, that was published in 1894. But the point is, Kipling wrote a large number of essays and short stories, and he created new words in many of them. So I want you to listen to this next piece. See if you can spot 3 of these new words. And here's a clue. They're all compound words.
You mean words that are consisting of 2 elements, like ice cream or part-time, and they're usually linked by a hyphen.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them I think you're going to find is really surprising. You won't expect it to be a new word by Kipling. Anyway, the extract is from a short story in his collection called Limits and Renewals. What he does is he creates a character called John Marden, who's had some alcoholic drinks and has then hallucinations. So notice the compound words, and if you spot them, put them in the chat box.
A fear leaped out of the goose-fleshed streets of London between the icy shop fronts and drove John to his flat. He argued that it must have been a chill, and fortified himself against it so resolutely that an advertisement, which had caught the tail end of his eye, stood up before him in the shape of a full-sized red and white bullock dancing in a teacup. It was succeeded a few days later by a small dog pressed against the skirting board of his room, an inky, fat horror with a pink tongue, crouched in the attitude of a little beast he had often watched at Mr. Williams's fashionable West End pet shop, where dogs lived in excelsior-floored cubicles, appealing to the passers-by. It began as a spreading blur, which morning after morning became more definite. It was better than the ox in the teacup, till it was borne in on John Marden one dawn that if it crawled out into the centre of the room, the universe would crash down on him.
Oh, yes, poor John Marden, indeed. But Kipling just loves compound words, doesn't he? There were no less than 10 just in that short extract. And I was looking at the chat coming down, and I think around the world you've spotted pretty well all of them.
Tea shop, goose fleshed, West End,
all
excelsior floored. Well done.
Well done, yeah. And now, point is, 3 of those were being used for the first time in British English. And did you spot them? I think you did, many of you. First one, the very first sentence.
A fear leaped out of the goose-fleshed streets of London.
Yes, goose-fleshed. Nobody had used that word before, as far as we know, you know. He took the word goose-flesh. Goose-flesh had been used earlier in the century.
Meaning a rough, pimply condition of the skin, right? Like a goose, like a, what do they call it? Goose skin, chicken skin sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. And he turned it into an adjective. Goose-flesh, goose-fleshed. And then he took the word floor and he added a trade name to it. Excelsior, some of you have spotted that. It was a local trade name in Victorian times, used for a type of thin wood shavings that you sprinkle onto floorboards, you know, to keep the moisture under control. And he gave us Excelsior floored.
So what was the surprising compound word?
Well, where did John Marden often watch the animals?
In Mr. Williams's fashionable West End pet shop.
Pet shop, indeed. That's the first time we see pet shop written down in this country. I mean, it's a really common word now, and one doesn't realize that it was invented really just over, 100 and whatever it is years ago.
Yes, exactly, mate. Goose-fleshed goosebumps, exactly the same. Yeah. Splendiferous. So who's in our next list of books that Macmillan has published?
Well, Charles Dickens now. Had to put him in. He's the most prolific of all the novelists of his century and a great word creator. His works are all terrific, so this is a difficult choice, but this next extract has one particular feature. which we'll talk about after Ben's read the piece out.
Now, this is from chapter 30 of the Pickwick Papers. There's a character in it called Nathaniel Winkle, who fancies himself as something of an outdoor sportsman.
Yeah, and the running joke in the novel, you see, is that he isn't very good at any of these outdoor sports at all. Oh, and the other thing you need to know, he's in love with Arabella Allen. So he wants to show off to her, you see.
Now, said Wardle, after a substantial lunch with the agreeable items of strong beer and cherry brandy had been done ample justice to, what say you to an hour on the ice? We shall have plenty of time. You skate, of course, Winkle, said Wardle. Yes, oh, yes, replied Mr. Winkle. I am rather out of practice. Oh, do skate, Mr. Winkle, said Arabella. I like to see it so much. It is so graceful, said another young lady. A third young lady said it was elegant, and a fourth expressed her opinion that it was swan-like.
I think I should chip in here. Note the phrase swan-like. Nothing new there. That word had been in the language since the 16th century. But listen to what happens when Mr. Winkle puts his skates on.
Now then, sir, said Sam in an encouraging tone, off with you and show 'em how to do it. Stop, Sam, stop, said Mr. Winkle, trembling violently and clutching hold of Sam's arm with the grasp of a drowning man. How slippery it is, Sam. Not an uncommon thing upon ice, sir, replied Mr. Weller. Hold up, sir. This last observation of Mr. Weller's bore reference to a demonstration Mr. Winkle made at the instant of a frantic desire to throw his feet in the air and dash the back of his head on the ice. These are very awkward skates, aren't they, Sam? Inquired Mr. Winkle, staggering. I'm afeard there's an awkward gentleman in 'em, sir, replied Sam. Just hold me at first, Sam, will you? Said Mr. Winkle. That's right. I shall soon get in the way of it, Sam. Not too fast, Sam, not too fast. Mr. Winkle, stooping forward with his body half doubled up, was being assisted over the ice by Mr. Weller in a very singular and unswan-like manner, when Mr. Pickwick most innocently shouted from the opposite bank, Sam, sir, here, I want you. Let go, sir, said Sam. Don't you hear the governor a-calling? Let go, sir. With a violent effort, Mr. Weller disengaged him from the grasp of the agonized Pickwickian, and in so doing, administered a considerable impetus to the unhappy Mr. Winkle. With an accuracy which no degree of dexterity or practice could have ensured, that unfortunate gentleman bore swiftly down into the centre of the reel at the very moment when Mr. Bob Sawyer was performing a flourish of unparalleled beauty. Mr. Winkle struck wildly against him, and with a loud crash, they both fell heavily down. Mr. Pickwick ran to the spot. Bob Sawyer had risen to his feet, but Mr. Winkle was far too wise to do anything of the kind in skates. He was seated on the ice, making spasmodic efforts to smile, but anguish was depicted on every lineament of his countenance.
Oh, Mr. Winkle, yes. It's a great passage by Dickens, I think. But did you notice the new word he created? Here it is again.
Mr. Winkle was being assisted over the ice by Mr. Weller in a very singular and unswan-like manner.
There it is, unswan-like. This is one of the favourite ways of making new words in English. You remember, we had swan-like before, now he's added a prefix to it. And is especially popular in English.
Dickens actually coined 17 words beginning with like unassertive, undiscussable, undistinctive, unyielding.
And Lewis Carroll did it as well. Everybody did it, actually, but listen to this one, this conversation, when Alice meets the enormous humanoid egg, Humpty Dumpty.
What a beautiful belt you've got on, Alice suddenly remarked. At least, she corrected herself on second thoughts, A beautiful cravat? I should have said, no, no, a belt. I mean, I beg your pardon, she added in dismay, for Humpty Dumpty looked thoroughly offended, and she began to wish she hadn't chosen that subject. If I only knew, she thought to herself, which was neck and which was waist. Evidently, Humpty Dumpty was very angry, though he said nothing for a minute or two. When he did speak again, it was in a deep growl. "It is a most provoking thing," he said at last, "when a person doesn't know a cravat from a belt." "I know it's very ignorant of me," Alice said, in so humble a tone that Humpty Dumpty relented. "It's a cravat, child, and a beautiful one, as you say. It's a present from the White King and Queen. There now." "Is it really?" said Alice, quite pleased to find that she had chosen a good subject after all. "They gave it me," Humpty Dumpty continued thoughtfully, as he crossed one knee over the other and clasped his hands round it. "They gave it me for an unbirthday present." "I beg your pardon," Alice said with a puzzled air. "I'm not offended," said Humpty Dumpty. "I mean, what is an unbirthday present?" "A present given when it isn't your birthday, of course." Alice considered a little. "I like birthday presents best," she said at last. "You don't know what you're talking about," cried Humpty Dumpty. "How many days are there in a year?" 365, said Alice. "How many birthdays have you?" "One." "And if you take one from 365, what remains?" 364, of course. "So there are 364 days when you might get unbirthday presents." "Certainly," said Alice. "And only one for birthday presents, you know. There's glory for you."
Indeed it is, yes. Unbirthday, unbirthday, a great coinage. Oh, indeed. So unwords turn out to be one of the most important ways of creating new words. And you'll find them right from Old English, Anglo-Saxon times, 1,000 years ago, right down to today.
Yeah, we're still doing it. Even modern internet users are doing it. You have a friend on social media that you don't want to message anymore, you can unfriend or unfollow them.
I don't have any unfriends or friends anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
it's sad, isn't it?
you could set up an Instagram, you could set up a TikTok account.
Listen, I have never ticked or talked, I have to say.
That's true.
Yeah.
We need to wind you up some more.
Yes. Anyway, it's one of Shakespeare's favorite methods. You mustn't forget Shakespeare. Mustn't forget Shakespeare, because Macmillan, I nearly said Macbeth. Oh,
God.
Published a one-volume edition of his works in 1864 called the Globe Edition. Hugely successful. Stayed in print for more than a century.
Someone said in the chat, so un-TikTokish of you, Dad.
Absolutely. Well done, whoever that was.
So yes, Shakespeare, who loved to create and use words beginning with un, amongst other things. Here are 7 in one sentence. It's from a pedantic school teacher. Now, a pedantic school teacher. Who could we get to read the words of a pedantic school teacher? Dad, would you mind reading a pedantic school teacher for me? That would be great. Holofernes, the pedantic school teacher in Love's Labour's Lost, who's complaining about the way Constable Dull has misunderstood Latin. Now, Holofernes, the teacher, describes Constable Dull's manner as
an undressed, unpolished, uneducated, unpruned, untrained, or rather unlettered, or rather unconfirmed fashion. That was pedantry, wasn't it?
It was very good. It was very good. Yeah. Very.
Anyway, there are actually 314 instances in the big Oxford English Dictionary. Excuse me, we'll have to mention Oxford here, where Shakespeare is the first citation for an un-usage. Most of them are adjectives, you know, uncomfortable, uncompassionate, unearthly, uneducated, all Shakespeare's. But there are many instances where the prefix has been added to an already existing verb. And these are the really interesting ones because some of them are so vividly dramatic.
Here's one from towards the end of Coriolanus. Now, Coriolanus, imagine the scene. The Roman senators are calling everyone to welcome back to Rome Coriolanus's mother Volumnia and her companions. Now, Coriolanus, who's called Marcius in the beginning of the play and in this quotation, was just about to attack Rome, and his mother and her ladies succeed in persuading him not to attack Rome, of course, much to the delight of the citizens. And this is what a senator says: "Behold, our patroness," Coriolanus's mother, "the life of Rome. Call all your tribes together, praise the gods, and make triumphant fires, strew flowers before them. Unshout the noise that banished Marcius, repeal him with the welcome of his mother. Cry, welcome, ladies,
welcome." Yes, and so they do, shouting welcome together. But notice the unusual nature of the word unshout.
Ah, yes, unshout the noise that banished Marcius.
I mean, you can't actually unshout, can you? I mean, you've shouted, that's it. But there are several other verbs like it in Shakespeare. From speak, he makes unspeak. From swear, he makes unswear. From curse, he makes uncurse. And there are many more. So what does Shakespeare's use of teach us? Well, I think it's an exercise in being daring. And first language speakers are being daring all the time. So why not second language speakers too? I mean, here are some of the recent creations that you will find in dictionaries these days. Yeah, Ben, cool.
Uncool.
Yeah. Funny.
Unfunny.
Sorry.
Unsorry.
Let's look at one in a bit more detail. Young.
Unyoung, then.
Unyoung. An excellent example. You see, we already have young and old as opposites. Why should we need something else? Because it adds an additional nuance of meaning. I mean, I do not feel old, for instance, but I am definitely unyoung.
Yeah, yeah, not young doesn't mean old. It's the lowest point on a scale of youngness, but it hasn't entered into the scale of oldness yet. That's why it appeals to you, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly so. Now, learners must be prepared to encounter these words in the drama of everyday conversation because, as I say, native speakers use this sort of thing all the time. And what Shakespeare teaches us is not to be scared of them and not to be scared to use them yourselves if you get the chance. I mean, be daring. Try it out.
Unmute yourselves.
Unmute. Oh,
someone said that in the chat.
Yeah, well done.
So yeah, Shakespeare influenced the language in so many ways, and there are also, of course, dozens of idioms he created that we use every day that have come into the English language without us realizing that they were originally his. For example, as good luck would have it.
Oh yeah, from the Merry Wives of Windsor.
You might laugh yourself into stitches.
Yeah, that's right. That's from Twelfth Night.
You could be a tower of strength to someone.
Tower of Strength from Richard III.
And this everyday nature of Shakespeare's language is something that Dad and I are especially interested in at the moment, as Will mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. That new book that you saw at the beginning called Everyday Shakespeare, Lines for Life. And it features the lesser known quotes that you use to talk about your daily life, not the sort of really famous quotes that perhaps have nothing particularly to do with you, like, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. There might be some of you out there that need to know about a horse, but most people don't. So.
Right. We've got this one from Hamlet. We haven't picked to be or not to be. That's not very everyday. But imagine you're doing something difficult in your life, or something that you don't want to be doing, like maybe the washing up or washing the car, and then someone comes along to help you. Then you can say, "For this relief, much thanks."
Yes, a number of times I've said that. And instead of wishing somebody good night with a simple, sleep well, why not this one from Julius Caesar?
Enjoy the honey-heavy dew of slumber.
Yeah, I think I could go to sleep after that. Yeah. I must go to sleep now. No, so we've chosen one quote for every day of the year, one per page, added some commentary and some background. So we're in the month of December when people are often celebrating, and today is the 12th of December, so we've chosen this quote for December the 12th.
I had rather fast from all 4 days than drink so much in one. Now that's Cassio in Othello, who is hungover. He's drunk far too much.
Yeah, fast means take a break from eating or drinking something. It's the sort of line you could say, like Cassio, when you've been celebrating a bit too much.
Oh, I'd rather fast from all 4 days than drink so much in one.
Ooh, yes.
Well, how about this?
Yeah, I mean, this line is the sort of thing you could say when you've got something very important to do tomorrow.
Yes, or if one of your students has an exam coming up, you might just say, get a good night's sleep, you'll need the rest tomorrow.
Yeah, but listen to the lovely poetic way that Shakespeare says it. Oh, and watch out for the word speeding, which here means success.
Each one betake him to his rest, tomorrow all for speeding. Do their best.
Absolutely. Take yourself to your rest, Benjamin.
Oh.
Tomorrow you can have
great success.
Great success.
Yeah.
Yes, our book is full of great lines like that. Lines most people, I think, have never read or heard, actually.
And we've been hearing from teachers that have used the book every day at the beginning of each class, using the day's quote as a great way to kick the class off and offer a conversation point for the students to talk about between themselves. So often young students, older people too, are put off by Shakespeare because they think he's too difficult. And hopefully these lines...
Well, when you read these everyday lines, it's much clearer that a great deal of what Shakespeare puts into the mouths of his characters is not at all difficult to understand. You didn't have any difficulty with the ones we just had a few seconds ago. So, well, look, time's passing. Let's end with one more.
Right before a little time for some questions. We are leaving you, so how can we wish you well? We could just say goodbye, but that's not very exciting. It's a bit abrupt, and it's certainly not very poetic or Shakespearean. So how about this one from A Midsummer Night's Dream?
Ah, yes. Joy, gentle friends, joy.
And fresh days of love accompany your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you. Will. Louise.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Louise, yes.
Lovely days.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be taken outside the everyday.
And back into
outside back in again. No, but the language is so rich and we're not aware of it in our everyday lives, and you've really brought it to life. And I'm going to go out and buy that book straight away.
Good for you.
Thank you.
But inspiring.
If anyone else is interested in the book,
I think there are lots of people.
We're going to be able to flash up that QR code again, and
will.
And you'll be able to follow the way to it. Also, if you, I'll put it into the chat here. You can go to everyday-shakespeare.com, and you can look up your birthday quote.
Oh yes, an awful lot of people use the book. The first thing they do is they go to the page that is their birthday, and hopefully they'll find a quote there that really sort of resonates with them and makes them feel having a happy day.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, there's the QR code. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's right.
Wonderful. There is one question that I think I have time to pose. It's from Inesi Klausa, and who asks, well, he's saying that he needs to teach or introduce his students to the language of literature and how it's created. And his question is, where should they start? Perhaps with your book might be a good place to start.
How literature's language is created.
Yes, I think a lot of people have done that, because you see, you start off with the quotation. The quotation resonates with you. Yes. The student then thinks, oh, maybe Shakespeare is for me. Where should I go? Well, now the thing is, at the bottom of every page, we give an actual context saying, where the quotation comes from. And one of the first things I would do if I were teaching here in this context, I would say, well, let's find it in the original scene. And you can do that by going to the back of the book where there's an index and it tells you exactly which scene it comes from, which line it is, and so on. And then it links you to our website that Ben and I did, shakespeareswords.com. Look it up there, and then you've got the scene. And what I would then do is get the students to act that scene out, or at least as much of it as you've got time to do. Because you're always saying this, Ben, aren't you? Shakespeare is for the stage, not for the page.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the best ways to make it your own is to speak it out loud, to dare to get these words into your mouth. We're not so used to putting into our mouths and speaking to each other in such poetry or eloquence. And I think a lot of people are probably a little afraid to, but certainly with these lines, they're much more accessible.
Yeah, they think they're going to get it wrong, and it doesn't
absolutely.
matter if you get it wrong.
Well, they
remember?
think that there's only one way to say it, but in actual fact, it's the feeling that you infuse or how you interpret it.
Yeah, and people who say,
and different people might interpret it in different ways. But that's interesting. It's being daring, as you said.
And no matter where you're from, no matter what accent you have, whether it's strong or thick or whatever, the only sound that's right for Shakespeare is your accent and your voice and your sound, because you want to speak it from the heart. Don't ever be afraid to speak poetry out loud.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. This has been an amazing talk and so complimentary to Chia's talk. I think both have been really inspiring, and what a wonderful way to celebrate the end of this year.